you're a member of the media dialing in, please press *1 to join the queue. We also have members of the media joining us on site today. I ask that you please head to the mic stand to ask your question. With that, we will open it up to our first question in the room.
Thanks, Bethany. Thanks for the amazing briefings today. It was very interesting. I have a few questions about, well, everything, but I'll start with the SR-1 mission. Can you just describe a little bit about how you would select a launch vehicle for that, if there's going to be some special requirements since it will be carrying a nuclear payload, and what sort of DOE, EPA, other agencies might need to be involved in getting a mission like that off the ground? Thanks.
Sure, yeah. So to launch a nuclear system, we have to go through the INSERB, the Interagency Nuclear Safety Review Board, and there's 7 agencies, all they don't approve it, but they look at the safety record of your spacecraft, and in that it also includes an assessment of the vehicle, and so we'll look what vehicles are out there that can launch us, that also would have a reliable record of launching safely to space.
And that's something we do all the time in science. We're launching Dragonfly with a nuclear payload, Rosalind Franklin with a nuclear payload, so it's something we do all the time.
Are there any vehicles in particular that are already eligible for that? Is it a special certification for that?
So I think internal to NASA, what we look at is what's in the Launch Services Program portfolio for that capability.
Thanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Micah Maidenberg, Wall Street Journal. Maybe for the administrator, are you going to need to cut any programs, existing programs, to find resources to pay for some of the new initiatives that you talked through today? For example, just the moon base, kind of rough math, $3 billion a year, $20 billion over 7 years. Gateway goes away. That's about $1 billion a year. It seems like there's a gap there. So cuts on the table? Do you have to find new budgetary resources or other funds to pay for some of these ambitions? Thanks.
So that's a question you receive quite a bit, and I continuously refer back to that NASA does not have a top-line problem. This is just where we choose to concentrate our resources. So if you take a look at 26 appropriations, almost $25 billion, you got a $10 billion plus up from the one big beautiful bill, of which a very decent portion of that was gateways. And we refer to repurposing, pausing and repurposing resources from a orbital outpost to the surface. You're drawing on a lot of resources that we have available. We talk about concentrating resources on the needle movers. When you think about it, we have a science technology mission directorate that's working on a lot of next generation capabilities for expanding humanity's reach in the solar system. We're going to concentrate those tech developments on the moon. Our science mission directorate does CLPS missions. That's going to be concentrated on the moon. So you're basically looking across the various mission directorates and making sure that if you have a component that and resources that they contribute towards one of the major objectives in the president's national space policy, like the moon base. And again, I would also point to, CLPS were being served incredibly well here on a program that was designed from the start to provide very affordable missions to the lunar surface. Now, if they were reasonably affordable when they were relatively bespoke and infrequent, again at 3 or 4 missions a year, we fully anticipate those costs down when there's multiple providers that are able to compete for these opportunities, and you're signaling demand for like upwards of 10 a year. So again, $25 billion a year plus a $10 billion plus up. A lot of things we're talking about are still in the 10% or so of our budget, on a multi-year period.
So you won't need to cut programs, or you feel like, given those resources?
No, I'd say what we're doing again is we're just focusing on the main needle-moving objectives in line with the president's national space policy. So we said we were pausing and shifting our focus on Gateway. So Gateway isn't canceled, but we get a lot of hardware that we've already invested in this case. Sometimes you have launches you've already paid for. You've got programs like Viper, for example, a program that was like almost entirely paid for that's now going to serve the purpose of the moon base. So Today was not a conversation about cancellations. It's about just focusing resources on the main objectives.
Thanks.
And we'll take one more question in the room from you, Audrey, and then we'll hop online.
Hi, Audrey Decker with Politico. Thanks so much for doing this. Question for the administrator, another budget question. I know you can't get ahead of the 27 budget rollout that, could be next week, but I was just wondering if you could, in broad strokes, maybe say how much of this plan you were able to incorporate into the 27 budget in terms of what we'll see there?
Yeah, I would just say that every one of the one, I come back to again, we don't have a top line problem. This is about allocation of our resources in line with the president's objective, and then doing it as efficiently as you possibly can. For example, our nuclear program, SR1, is not about going and lobbying for billions of dollars to undertake a brand new mission. Honestly, we have to earn the right to be able to do that after $20 billion worth of failed programs over time. This is why we're taking hardware that we already have, a reactor that's mostly built that we already have, fuel that's mostly paid for over time, leveraging the expertise from Glenn and Marshall that work on this kind of hardware all the time to build things alongside industry like power conversion and radiators so that we can bring this thing together as, admittedly, as I described it, the 70% solution. Prove that it works, should get America underway on nuclear power and propulsion, then you can come back and maybe ask for more in the future when you show that it can be done. And that's why, again, you cross a program, moon-based, take the resources that have already been made available, make use of the contracts that we've already been working on and scale them up that are affordable, like CLIPS program. A lot of the tech and science that we're going to attach to these, we put an RFI out. These aren't things that necessarily NASA can pay for. We want academia to build instruments for some of these landers and rovers, and we will incorporate them. Make use of the comms that we already have and some of the ability to control these missions. So we are trying to be extremely efficient in our approach, show that can be done, deliver some wins here, and certainly earn the right and the confidence from our various stakeholders to make further investments in the future.
And then a quick one on CLD, if I may. What was announced today was a pretty seismic shift from even just what the agency was said, last year. So I guess maybe could you provide some more detail about when NASA kind of realized that path wasn't a viable path forward in terms of seeing that there wouldn't really be a commercial market there, and just kind of, I guess, the backstory behind that decision that you all made today.
Okay, go ahead.
We're constantly evaluating commercial opportunities, access, and what we're seeing on board space station. And we've certainly grown the portfolio of what we do, and so it's something we've looked at for quite a while. I will say that we had hoped by this point in time that we were in a much better position with the market. I think it was the right time to have the discussion and kind of objectively look at everything we're doing to make sure we're on the right path. Anytime you get a new administration, it's a great opportunity to, take a fresh look. Where are we going? Do we have our best foot forward? And so in putting everything together between market budgets, complexities of building and managing a space station, we realized we've got to have a discussion because the original path we laid out is not, it's fraught with a lot of higher risks.
Maybe just to build on it too, because I don't want our message today to be misinterpreted, right? I mean, NASA does have a history. You can look at a lot of our OIG reports where we are way over budget and substantially behind schedule, and at some point you have to course correct and get things back on track. Let's be clear, the International Space Station has an end date. It's absolutely unavoidable. We have to all arrive at that exact end date with all of our international partners, but it will happen, which means we must work with industry to have a replacement space station, giving this sober view on this is what we understand the market to be. How do we know what we know? Well, we know who the PAM missions we put out. We know how fast those seats sell. We know necessarily what the backlog associated is. We know what we subsidize as it relates to those missions. We know what we subsidize for cargo. So we have some sense of this. We certainly don't have the complete picture that maybe some of our industry partners have. So enlighten us, educate us on this whole thing. This is the whole point of the RFI. Tell us what we have right, tell us what we have wrong. We know it's certainly complicated to build a space station to keep people alive in the harsh reality of space. And we know what it takes operationally to keep them alive. The things that come up that Dana walked us through, the EVAs to go out and repair, the medical situations where we have to bring people home. Let us put the full picture out there, take a sober view at it, Tell us what we got right and what we got wrong, because there will be an end date. Industry that was here, that has been supporting us through the CLD effort, will wind up building this replacement space station, but let's just do it eyes wide open as to what we think the real costs are going to be, what the real market is, and what complexity is going into it from the technical build out and the operations, and give us the comfort, the American people, and everyone around the world that depends on what we do on the International Space Station, the confidence that we can do this the right way.
And we will now move to the phone bridge with Will Robinson-Smith of Spaceflight Now.
Hi, thank you all for taking the time to speak with us today and for the robust presentations. Question, I suppose, for Dr. Lori Glaze. In your remarks about moving beyond Artemis 5 and looking to work with at least 2 launch providers to target landings every 6 months, does that future also involve Orion launches with the Space Launch System rocket, or is this looking to move entirely beyond SLS, starting in the Artemis 6 timeframe? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll tell you the way I see this, Jared laid out the broad vision for where we're headed, what our plans are for trying to get to and build a moon base that's going to require a lot of access to the lunar surface. We know where we are today with our legacy systems, with our SLS and Orion government-owned legacy systems. We know where we want to be in the future, which is a commercial transportation ecosystem that can support the types of missions and the effort that we have in front of us. We put out the RFI today specifically to get information from our providers, from our traditional industry, from other potential providers that are out there, to help inform us in that acquisition strategy so that we can plan what that transition looks like from the traditional legacy over to the commercial.
And I would say, and Dr. Glaze can weigh in on this. I mean, we've heard from, as you would expect, every one of the contractors that contributes the primes to SLS, and they've all said they want that expressed interest in taking their components of that system to a commercial pathway. I would be shocked if we didn't see multiple proposals with different variations of hardware for those opportunities for Artemis 6 and beyond.
Absolutely.
And we will take one more question online and then go over to you, Jeff. It is going to be with Jonathan Seri of Fox News.
Thank you, Bethany. This one's also for Jared Isaacman. America's return to the moon has been delayed in the past by changing presidential administrations. Obviously, we're going back in the near term, but what ensures that we stay there for the long term and that we stay the course for sending humans to Mars?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. Honestly, that was a lot of what today was about, specifically NASA's response to President Trump's national space policy, which calls for exactly that. Please do not go back to the moon just for the footprints and the flags. You must pick up where we left off more than a half century ago. Build the moon base, create an enduring presence, and if you're going to build a moon base and have an enduring presence, then you better undertake missions with great frequency. And if you're going to take great missions with great frequency, they have to be affordable. That's what we laid out today. What's within our current plan that we can optimize to get to higher launch cadence, and what does the future look like many years down the road after we've already gotten back to undertake missions again with frequency, and then when they're there, talk to us about the base. We're going to take it in phases, and every one of these is designed to make a lot of use of the resources, the contract vehicles we've already had, so that the time, money that's gone into it through those various administrations serve the bigger purpose. Why we're leveraging CLIPS, why we're leveraging hardware from our various nuclear programs, which goes to your next point of where do you go after the moon? Well, the moon is certainly going to be our technology proving ground. We have our various phased approaches, power, surface mobility and such, but what we want to get to is in situ resource manufacturing, so you can take the ingredients from today's ignition event, which is nuclear power and propulsion, and the experience we get on the moon with in situ resource manufacturing. That's going to be key components to sending Americans to Mars someday, and then being able to bring them back home so they can tell us about it.
We'll head over to you, Jeff.
Good afternoon, Jeff Faust of Space News. Question for the Administrator. What discussions have you had with members of Congress about the proposals you've laid out today in terms of securing support for reallocating funding or any language you would need in the NASA authorization bill to carry out these programs?
I mean, we've had extensive conversations. I think We try and at least have a no surprises policy. So I'm having conversations with congressional leadership, having conversations with the White House, with major industry players that are contributing into these efforts. We had to have those conversations well in advance of actually the February announcement on standardizing SLS, increasing launch cadence. And I think you saw a lot of members of Congress come out in support of that. Senator Cruz and the work he's done already on the Senate reauthorization bill, I think you'd find is very much in line with what we shared today. I noticed he sent out an ex post of support on this. So I think everybody understands what's at stake right now. Meeting the moment. When I say that, success and failure comes down to months, we mean it. And I think it's hard to look at the approach that we've had up till now on some of these things and say it was perfect, just let it be. I mean, Artemis 2 had to go back into the VAB to relearn some lessons that we should have captured coming off of Artemis 1. You got a lot of OIG reports that are problematic. You can. And this is not limited to any one component, any one mission directorate, right? We got a science mission. We had the previous administration canceled. Again, I think we spent $250 million last year just keeping it canceled. We have a rival that's going to go and try and procure samples and bring them back in 2028. Like, that's not a good place to be. So I think all the stakeholders have come to a realization too that we have to do some things differently. I think you're seeing it in some of the public support. You're seeing it in the new authorization bill, and this is what it takes if we're going to get the job done, to go to the moon, do so before our rivals, build the base, and do the other things.
Good to go, Joey.
Thanks. Thanks, guys, for doing this. Question for Jared and anyone else who wants to reply. I was wondering if you've gotten any initial reactions from the international partners who were working on Gateway. How do they feel about this, and what kind of role do you see them playing in the moon-based plans? And I'm also curious how this kind of plan, all these plans came together. Was there any kind of constructive disagreement within your colleagues as you figured out how to implement President Trump's national space policy?
So I guess we'll start with the international partners component. Similar to the no surprise policy, I've had conversations with all my counterparts at the various space agencies that contribute to the International Space Station, as well as our lunar efforts. I think everybody is pretty excited to support, operations on the surface. I can't imagine anyone would rather their astronauts be above the moon looking down where all the action is, as opposed to being on the surface itself. I think we're fortunate the timing here. First, we're going to all collectively salvage a lot from the efforts in Gateway. There is communication hardware, there's avionics, things we can put down on the surface or support, other programs. But we were hardly past the point of no return. I mean, the only two modules outside of PP that were really cut all had significant technical issues. So by the time that Gateway, had we continued that course and been up there, we'd have been looking down on our rival and all the fun they were having on the surface for years. So I think it was kind of easy to get everyone aligned on that. And we're excited to see the ESA astronauts, JAXA astronauts, UAE, other partners, standing alongside us when we're on the lunar surface. And in terms of achieving the national space policy, we had a number of Tiger teams, a lot of internal discussions. An event like today, was certainly months in the making. And these contributions, even beyond NASA, OSTP and others, all had opportunities to weigh in and provided fantastic guidance and support along the way.
Thanks.
And we'll move online for a couple of questions. We will start with Andrea Leinfelder of the Houston Chronicle.
Hi, my question is also about Gateway. The One Big Beautiful Bill provided funding and said Gateway should be developed. So I'm just curious, can NASA pause Gateway without permission from Congress, or do you need the NASA Authorization Act to really make that possible? Also, by pivoting Gateway to the moon base, how big of a role will the Johnson Space Center play in developing a lunar outpost? Thanks.
I'm happy to say it. So we have not canceled Gateway at all. So there were resources that were made available to Gateway under the One Big Beautiful Bill. We paused and are repurposing a lot of our resources towards the surface. I think we all recognize that is a national imperative, aside from the fact that it's actually in the national space policy. Now, in terms of the role that Johnson Space Center is going to play, well, an enormous role. I mean, you've got the entire moon base. I mean, this is the operational excellence for human spaceflight, not just training our astronauts, but helping control them when they're in low Earth orbit. I fully anticipate that to be applicable on the surface where we all want to be. So I put it in my workforce letter, which we did put online earlier. Then we talk about pause and pivoting. That includes the workforce as well as the resources towards the primary priority here, which is building the moon base.
And we'll go to Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much. I think my question is probably to Lori. I'm curious about the new allowable orbits. You said that the HLS partners didn't really want to use NRHO and that you were opening up that aperture for what kind of orbits they could use, and that some of this could provide maybe better landing opportunities and better abort capabilities. So could you just expand on that? And is it possible that maybe the earliest landing missions wouldn't actually go to the South Pole, they'd go to somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a good question. The NRHO orbit does have pretty high demands on the HLS system for being able to have access to the surface. Some of the other limitations I mentioned. If you needed an abort on one of these early missions, in particular the first landed mission, it could be up to a week before you could get back up to rendezvous with the Orion. So it has been suggested that we consider some different orbits, perhaps some lower lunar orbits, and the intent is still to go to the South Pole. I think both of our providers have indicated that they still have a desire to do that and to meet that requirement in building their landing systems. They want to make sure that what they're building is going to feed forward to the systems that we need in the future. So that's, as far as I know, that's still on the table, but they are looking at some different orbits to have better access to that South Polar region. Give them a little bit more flexibility.
Take it away, Ken.
Hi, Ken Chang, New York Times. Returning to the commercial LEO destinations alternative, I guess first for Jared. This sounds like a vote of no confidence in the business plans of the various companies who envision these free-flying stations, but it also sounds like you're open to being convinced otherwise. And then for Dana, a couple of detailed questions. When were you thinking that this core module would be launched? And whatever that answer is, it doesn't seem like there's enough time to design and build that. So is this really, are you just envisioning the Axiom Space module that's scheduled to go up and sort of rebadging that as a NASA module?
Well, I mean, to hit the first part, this is look, we are sharing what we know with all the experience we have operating the International Space Station alongside all of the commercial cargo payloads and the crew operations through the various PAM missions, and we are saying we want to get this right. I mean, that's really the thing. I mean, we talk a lot, Nikki's gonna like this, about Roman being on time and under budget, because it's the only program we can say that about. So we're trying to get back into a rhythm. We're being very transparent, replacing the International Space Station, which is not optional. No one's here trying to make a case of keeping IS up until the end of time, and I don't think our international partners are behind that at all. So the idea is to make the transition the right way, and we have to put everything out on the table on this one right now. We $10 billion plus up in the One Big Beautiful Bill. $250 million of it was for a replacement for a commercial space station. The idea is always, from the get-go, depended on multiple customers out there, NASA being one of many, and we're saying, explain it to us, because we have to get this right. Talk us through the technical elements of it, because it took us a long time, and we had to learn. There were a lot of lessons learned, so we want to make sure those are transferred, and we will owe that to our partners to make sure they have that information as well. There's operational considerations. We'll put it out there. There's two pathways. Convince us on the first one, which is totally fine, because we have to do something here. We acknowledge that. Doing nothing is not an option. It was in red on Dana's slide. And then here's the alternative one, where we look at it as more of an incremental approach that brings down some risk. Both options are on the table. We're not dragging this out. The RFIs are out, I think, either today or tomorrow. We're having breakout sessions tomorrow where we can hear back from industry. What my hope is, we've got an opportunity here for, right from the get-go in phase 1, 3 modules. There's a lot of companies who have been working hard on this. What I want to see companies say that I've got it. I'll make that module for you. We'll prove out those capabilities. We'll show it. and it'll be the setup for a very successful commercial space station thereafter. We have the confidence, here's the data behind it, and another company says, I've got that module, we're there, here's our approach to doing it, and that will someday turn into a commercial space station. We're putting everything out there to get the feedback to go in the right direction, so this is not an over budget, behind schedule program that puts America's presence in LEO at risk.
I would just add for your question about the core module, the capabilities needed and the specifics I shared today are not aligned with any one vendor, but they have all been working on technologies and capabilities that are foundational to a space station. So my hope is there's a lot of broad interest in the core module overall. And I think there are a lot of capabilities that are in design, on their way, and that are applicable. In terms of how long it will take, I don't know. We're going to get industry feedback. We're going to work with industry. We'll see who's interested. We'll see where we go from there. But some of that's going to be iterative in terms of trying to understand the specific path forward. We'll move as quickly as we can. This is critical that we get this right. So as you saw today, we're pressing towards a draft RFP in just a few months. So we're going to press fast.
Eric.
Eric Berger, Ars Technica. Question for Amit, I think. Just curious where the NASA workforce is today, sort of from a confidence standpoint, from a sort of an attitude standpoint. 2025 was a very difficult year for the space agency for a number of reasons. I won't go into them, but I think we all know them. There's now finally some clear leadership, but today and in the last few weeks, you've announced some really wrenching changes to how the agency does, and I think some of them are probably pretty good, but it's changing people's lives and the things that they've been working on, which has been a problem for NASA in the past. So I'm just wondering, where is the workforce? In your opinion, you talk to them, you were here, you've been here a long time, you know them. How are people sort of dealing with this change?
It's a great question, Eric. I would say in general, the workforce is hungry for leadership, and they've got it now. The clear vision is there. I mean, everything we're doing now is, and to your point about we're changing things around, we're making kind of reallocations, and we're being honest about where we are in a lot of other cases. I would say, generally speaking, almost all the workforce is also very appreciative. We've had feedback saying that some of the things we're saying are like therapy to them in terms of things that we've known, but we just haven't been able, because of the constraints we've been living under, to kind of deal with. So that's been a thing that a lot of folks have been just kind of wow, we can say what we think and do the things that we know we're supposed to be doing. The idea that we're going to bring the spirit of what we're doing, getting people closer to the work, stop watching things and start doing things again, I think has really energized the workforce tremendously. There is going to be some, because of some of the changes we've seen here and some of the ways we have to reallocate resources to work, some of folks, their projects might get changed. But I'll tell you, I think you all saw, we got a lot of work to do. And one of my messages to the workforce is that, hey, we need every single one of y'all to help us. We need, maybe the job you're doing today is going to be different than the one you need to be doing in the future, but we're going to need all hands. We're going to bring in new hands, where we're trying to really get focused and aligned to the mission. So I would tell you, I spent all day on stage listening to the boss, but separately, when I go and I'm almost certain, as we've been traveling around, that this is a huge shot in the arm for the team.
Okay, thank you.
Jackie.
Hi, thanks for doing this. Question, I think, for Dana. So I wanted to wrap my head around what exactly this core module is. Is this going to be designed by NASA, or is this also something that you're looking for industry to hash out? And given all these changes, how long have these companies been aware of these changes, and how will that kind of inform how they respond to this RFI? And then given the timeline for the RFP, when do you foresee funds being deployed for them? And then, sorry, I know this is a long list of questions.
There's a lot packed in there. I'm going to have to...
I'll pause there. Maybe I can have a follow-up.
Okay. Let's see. Let me back that up. You're going to have to unpack that one.
Sorry. I can start over. Sorry.
Oh, no. NASA's we're going to procure the core module. We need industry to go build the core module. Of course, we will have the fundamental high-level specifications and requirements for what it needs to do to both be compatible with ISS and to support the additional expansion with the commercial modules. But that's something we're looking for industry to go build. So we'll go procure that. That's part of both the RFI discussion and when I talked about the draft RFP in June, that's part of that. as fast as we can go towards awards, I mean, that's really what's going to dictate expenditures. I mean, that's just classically how that works. So we're going to push through that as quickly as we can. And that schedule is what will dictate when we can go start spending on it. And I think you had a number 3 and 4 in there somewhere.
No, last follow-up question. Given that the current law is ISS is ending in 2030, but I know that there's language in a Senate bill to extend it to 2032, where do you stand on that timeline? I mean, what's the right timeline for decommissioning ISS?
It's really important for us to maintain continuous presence. So first and foremost, I want a plan that closes. I want a trajectory that gets us from the existing space station to commercial stations. We need a successful plan to get there. There are a lot of things that go into space station supportability. Of course, if we're asked to extend it, we have the technical capability to do that. We are not going to stand in the way when commercial industry is ready. It is still our job to go pivot and move to transitioning to space stations that are commercially owned and commercially operated in 2030. So we're still on that trajectory and on that plan. Technically, can I extend? Yes. There's also partners that have to weigh in and consider, but our overall goal hasn't changed at all. We are just trying to change the approach to an incremental one that allows multiple providers to stay in the game, allows the market to grow, continues competition, and hopefully gets us to the 2 space stations in a much more seamless transition method between current station and future stations.
And maybe just to weigh in a little bit in terms of like the timeline, the opportunity to discuss, with industry and partners. Everything really we discussed today was in response to, President Trump's executive order on American space superiority. So this is our national space policy. If you really look at it, timeframes for when we have to respond, that's really the triggering process. If we all need to sit down, okay, it's very specific in here, transitioning to a space station by a certain timeline. It's very specific, returning to the moon, building a moon base, and it forces you as a team to kind of look at the current approach and reevaluate, is this what's in line with President's space policy? Now, Carlos, our lunar viceroy earlier, as a joke, mentioned before, hey, initially we were thinking one incredible lunar terrain vehicle. But then what changed? A national space policy comes out and it says you need a moon base. Well, it's like if we're gonna build a moon base, we're gonna need more than one rover. We're gonna need mobility for astronauts and autonomous ones. We're gonna have to demonstrate logistics. We're gonna probably want it to be able to do science. We're gonna need lots of rovers. And you're able to then look at what resources do you have available in order to achieve this. And we had a plan where we had an orbiting moon base, and now we can repurpose a lot of that towards a surface moon base. We do the same thing in commercial stations. It forces an evaluation to look at it. And the point being that we have only just kind of approached that timeline from the original space policy directive, and within days, we're here aligning our workforce and industry on how we're going to achieve it. So these aren't generally like our good ideas here. We want to pivot, and we've had 6 months to interact with industry. There's a national space policy. You're on a shot clock. We recognize there are short fuses here for every one of the objectives we're trying to achieve. We formulate our plan, and we share it with all of you, and then we gather data tomorrow so we can action.
And we'll move to the phone bridge real quick with Marcia Dunn from the AP.
Good evening, Marcia Dunn, AP. I'm wondering, what's the fate of the Hubble Space Telescope as it approaches its 36th launch anniversary? And under the new Artemis campaign, if all goes well, how soon could we expect to see NASA launching astronauts to Mars? Are you still tracking the 2030s for that? Thanks a lot.
So I'll start with Hubble. Hubble is very well, taking amazing images. In fact, the image we revealed today from James Webb has a sister image from Hubble, and so I encourage you to look at that when they get released tomorrow. The one I know, the sort of crux of the question is, will it re-enter? Clearly, the sun has been very active. The whole environment has changed, and the drag on the spacecraft, it has actually increased. What we're doing is we're starting with a wonderful tech demo that we're doing with our commercial partners at Catalyst to actually try and grab and reboost why can't I think of the name of the spacecraft? That's terrible. No, Swift, thank you, Dr. Glaze. Just blanked out. The Swift spacecraft, and to actually, which is it'll be a great capability to actually be able to grab and maneuver something in orbit. So it's a really, really excellent TAC demo that we're doing, looking at launching that in the summer to go and try do a reboost with Swift, and then if that is successful, we will look at what it would take to be able to actually reboost Hubble.
And I'll take the second half of that question, and then Jared can probably expound on it. But we're here today really talking about the focus on the lunar surface. As you heard, we have a mandate. We're doing everything we can to focus all of our energy, our resources into trying to establish that enduring presence on the surface of the moon. So you've heard a lot about that today. You've also heard that a lot of that work is going to build on new technologies, new capabilities, new operational capabilities that are going to build forward towards Mars. But I think we need to get really focused right now. Let's achieve what we have in front of us right now, and then we'll address the next question at a later date. Unless Jared wants to say more.
We're good.
And we'll now go to David Brown with the Scientific American.
Hi, good afternoon. I have two questions. First about the nuclear power to Mars. I'm curious, what is the driver for nuclear power to Mars when we can get there in half the time with conventional propulsion? Why not send them somewhere farther, like Uranus? And then once they get there, I'm curious how far the Skyfall helicopters can travel, and how much mass can they carry, given how heavy ground-penetrating radar is.
So I'll answer the first question. I'm going to phone a friend maybe for the second one. As far as the not going further, we have not decided where the mission will end. I didn't say if we're going to fly by or we're going to capture Mars. I think the team is still looking at exploring the opportunities. Once we drop off Skyfall, what do we do with SR-1 Freedom? So that trade is still open, and we will explore what we can do to continue the science and ultimately the long-duration operations of a nuclear electric propulsion spacecraft, because we do want to push the bounds with this demonstrator, find all the points on the operational box, and explore them.
Obviously a big fan of sending it to Uranus, as you heard in my presentation earlier. But for Skyfall, they're going to be very, very similar in capability to Ingenuity. So you think sort of those kind of distances that they can travel. They will have some capability. They will have cameras on them to be able to take images, but they're not going to be full up heavy science. But they are going to be very, very similar to Ingenuity.
And we will head back to the room.
Thank you very much. Tarek Malik with space.com. And I think my question is for Steve about SR1. 2028 doesn't seem like it's very far away. It doesn't seem like it's far away for much of what we've heard today. But for standing up like a nuclear-propelled spacecraft, something that has never really been done before, I'm curious what gives you the confidence that you have all of the pieces now. How ready is the technology to connect a reactor to the PPE that you've got that you're going to be using? What kind of tests do you need to do either on Earth or in space, and what showstoppers do you see that you'd have to overcome? Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, so I think the big advantage here is the power and propulsion element, right? I mean, that is a large portion of the vehicle that we don't necessarily have to worry about anymore. As far as the nuclear reactor technology, NASA's been studying this for a very long time, along with the Department of War. And so technology is available. I spoke to the radiators. I think NASA has studied them. There are flight-like radiators that we have tested. Microreactors are picking up within the Department of Energy. So there's industry looking at these smaller technologies. Department of War has run in partnership with NASA some spaceflight reactor concepts. And some of that has led to engineering development ground hardware. And so there is knowledge in industry, in the government, from both a design perspective as well as engineering level hardware available. And so to me, it is a maturing of that technology that currently exists. and then an integration into a vehicle. And like I said, the PPE gives us just a tremendous leg up in really being able to focus on the reactor and the integration of that into a known spacecraft bus.
Manuel.
Thank you. Manuel Masanti with Exploración Espacial. Thank you, Administrator, and the rest of the panel. So much information. Two questions for Carlos. At some point in your presentation, you mentioned that we need to increment the bandwidth with the moon and take it to 500 megabits per second. Is this starts now in phase 1, or is something that you need to do it in phase 2 when we have capability on the surface? And can you explain what is lunar net? And then my second question is, do you believe that pivoting from lunar orbit to the surface, this will incentivize even more the participants of the Artemis Accords, that now they see that they can reach the surface? Countries in Latin America, for example, Argentina, or Mexico, or even Spain, that now they can provide instruments or science to the lunar surface?
Absolutely. So we're going to start building the infrastructure with respect to communications and observation in phase 1. So we had already started planning the first constellation, so that's in progress, and we're going to seek a second constellation. So the increase in bandwidth to assets on the surface of the moon, eventually around the moon, is going to start in phase 1. The lunar net, I won't go into a lot of details because still something that we're thinking about, but it's basically standards that we can test, because eventually we'll have tons of assets on the surface. We want to standardize how things communicate with each other and with the constellations and back to Earth. So we're going to start testing what are the things that should be part of a standard protocol. And with your point about the amount of payload capacity on the surface of the moon, absolutely. Up to now, we've been doing a lot of big things. Spacecraft that are going to take humans back to the moon, the rocket, some payloads associated with that, but not a huge amount of payload capacity. Now we can have university students that are in college or in high school today that can think of something that is useful for what an eventual moon base be and have their payload on the surface of the moon. And that expands to bigger things. Maybe somebody is not ready to give us a habitat, but what about some technology for power distribution or dust prevention or the stuff that connects things together when we're on the surface? So all of those things, we're open for business to hear your ideas, and hopefully we have a lander for you to take it to the surface of the moon.
Paul Brinkman with Aerospace America magazine. Or we'll go in the room.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Felcher with Payload. My question is about the changes to the CLD program. I'm curious why you think the market that NASA thought would be there when the program was originally envisioned isn't there now, if it's policy hurdles or technical hurdles, or if NASA's predictions were just wrong. Anything you can share about kind of why that commercial market isn't there as intended?
I would tell you a couple things. First, I think you know this, and we've said it a couple times, but we can't actually force or create a market. We do spend time getting independent market research data. We do that periodically. And many years ago when we started this program, the data we had was we're 10 years away from having a mature market. And so a lot of the data is it's projecting, right? It's making estimates about either a breakthrough capability, product, technology, something that's either going to drive manufacturing in space or something that's going to drive a recurring demand to access space to then bring it back to the ground. As we've watched over time, these independent market research surveys continue to tell us it's about that far out. And so when I go back and I look at what I originally had, we had 8 years ago, when it said, hey, we're probably 10 years out, and now it still says 10 to 15 years out, you're kind of chasing a moving target. Our priority and our goal is to capitalize on what we have with Space Station, open up access as much as we can. So a lot of these hopeful areas that we see that were informed through these independent surveys, we focus on them, we prioritize them. We take input from industry, whether it's our CLD providers or others in industry who are trying to help stimulate and get the market going, and those are the areas we focus on. We talked a lot about private astronaut missions. That was a key area that we really thought, not just for international interests, but tourism. We thought that would be much bigger. So there are a lot of areas that had been predicted and that we've really opened up access and focused on, but we continue to kind of get the feedback that the maturation in those areas is still on the further out horizon.
I can maybe add on to this a little bit and say with a lot of direct experience and confidence in my answer that putting humans in space is extremely expensive. I mean, this is a very costly endeavor. In fact, I mean, if you look at the SOMD budget, the majority of our budget, more than 50%, simply goes to putting crew and cargo in space, regardless of whatever station you're going to. Now, take the human out of it, well, then that cost can go down quite materially. But I think the simple reality is it costs an awful lot to put humans in space, and we haven't had that scientific breakthrough yet that necessitates human in space to create it and get more value out than we put in. Now, we are trying to, we're not coming just with problems. We're trying to bring solutions to the table on this. PAM missions, I think it's very challenging on those providers, when 25% of the associated cost has to be borne by the provider. And that's why we're making available the commander seat, making that available for sale. That is what you do when you're trying to help ignite a market, not necessarily force it. How else can we be helpful? Look, it's one of our main objectives is getting more NASA astronauts into space and try and get to that breakthrough science and research that someday does necessitate lots and lots of space stations. So we could potentially be a customer on board. We'll create a front door. Give us all your good ideas. What is, we want to maybe bring in a chief commercial officer to go out and engage with pharmaceutical industries. Tell us what we're missing. Let's get it up to the station, because we want nothing more than to make sure we have a home for our astronauts and our international partner astronauts when the space station comes to an end. And ideally, we're able to buy it across multiple stations, which means the cost is less and we can put more astronauts up there. But it is expensive, and that big breakthrough hasn't happened yet. But if we are wrong, we've created an opportunity forum for the CLD providers to explain it to us. And we've created various other pathways they can consider as well. And we've got a whole session tomorrow to talk about it.
Thank you. Pablo Fuente with Orbita Infinita.
Thanks for doing this. My question is for Carlos. Carlos, you outlined an extraordinary logistics strain for the moon base, 8,000 kilograms of carriers and consumables. Yet the presentation focused heavily on power, mobility, and communications. When does the food and biological life support technology development actually begin? And is NASA considering closed-loop biogenerative systems, or are you planning to resupply from Earth? Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm going to answer the first part of that question. So the experimentation part of the development of the moon base is definitely going to start on phase 1. Today we talked about plans which show the demand of launchers, landers, and potentially rovers, things that we can put stuff on. And we have not completely closed the loop on what is it that we're going to put on it. So through our analysis, if we determine that the things that we're going to need at the end, which is to support humans permanently living on the surface of the moon, requires those things, definitely the logistics is something that we know we're going to need. We'll start experimenting early, and we'll use some of that payload capacity that we haven't allocated to do that, either in phase 1 or phase 2. And second question I'm not familiar with, so.
I think your plans are, if I understood, permanent presence can probably require, some moves towards ECLS, closed loop anyway. Part of the discussion we've been having, and Dana knows this better than anybody, closed loop ECLS is one of the biggest problems, in terms of what industry is capable of doing right now and what we struggled with and got to a conclusion on Gateway, on Space Station. Even Gateway was open loop in the baseline design because it was just too hard to close that loop. So scarring that system for that is really challenging. Eventually, we want to get there, but that's what we're flying Space Station for.
Yeah, I guess I missed the ECLS part on the closed loop. So yeah, we're growing. We started with in the development of the stuff. Some of the things that we're thinking of for repurposing on the architecture of Gateway as an orbital outpost could be some of the Eclipse components that we're already doing, which could be we could put in play and have a habitation experimentation going from phase 1 to phase 2. So yeah.
And I know we have all had a long ignition day, and since we are nearing the end of this, I'm going to go ahead and give you last question, Sana.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Hi, Sana from Bloomberg News. Thank you for doing this. Following up on Jackie's question about Gateway, I was just wondering how much advance notice NASA gave its international partners of all the changes being made. For example, I know last week ESA released a schematic of the Gateway with its habitat module attached, and I also believe ESA's Director General noted that they hadn't seen the new proposal ahead of the meeting.
So I have had a chance to speak again with all my counterparts, the various space agencies, and some were, I think some of the timing there worked out to a difference of a matter of hours, actually. But we've been having conversations since I've been confirmed in this position and discussing our thoughts, and I think those conversations got extremely focused after the President's National Space Policy came out, that we have not crossed the point of no return with an orbital outpost here. We have an opportunity to repurpose resources. I think we, again, all universally agree it is better to have an astronaut on the surface than it is looking down from above it. And in terms of the learning that we may do, from science to tech demonstrations that will inform future missions to Mars, that's going to happen on the surface. So, some of the timing probably, again, came within hours, but we've spoken with every one of our partners, Canadian Space Agency, pros at robotics, where can we apply this arm? We've got lots of good ideas, very constructive conversation, same with all of our partners. Again, I think we're envisioning a future here, which is part of why we gave a demand signal for 2 different pathways to the moon with frequency and affordably, where we're going to be able to stand on the moon with a lot of our partners in the years ahead.
Yeah, if I could just finish with the question before about, with the moon base, like how other countries, other Accord signatories, how the rest of the partnership might see themselves now a little bit more presently in moon base rather than, up to this point. I mean, I think that's a really important observation. The partnership is one of the most magical things that came out of ISS. We moved it to Gateway for that reason. We respect and appreciate how important it is. We think that the service is going to grow, and it's an important reason why. There's a kind of easier pathways to get there in some cases because you have smaller landers and you can do things. But more importantly, one of the reasons why space station is hard and why Gateway is hard is because the systems are physically, electrically, chemically in communication with each other. When they're on the surface, they're not necessarily until Carlos decides they're all going to be connected, which eventually I know he wants to do. But the point is, like, you can reliably kind of compartmentalize some of these things in a way that you can fly a university payload on a lander that's nearby some other stuff because it's not going to have an impact, right? The risk is sort of compartmentalized. So there's a lot more ways to envision this in a really positive way is how we're expanding the partnership rather than, kind of the plans we had in place already.
And with that, we are wrapped. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your participation. Participants should be disconnected at this time.